Welcome to Shoot Like a Girl, a podcast featuring interviews with extraordinary military women from around the world who push their limits on and off duty. I'm your host, Kate Stewart, and this is episode number 32. Today's guest is Afton David. Afton is a lawyer for Thales Canada by day and an infantry reservist with the Cameron Highlanders of Ottawa and amateur boxer by night. She's also a new mom to an 8-month-old boy. She has an extensive list of accomplishments, and rather than me trying to explain them all, I think it's best to listen to the episode and hear directly from her. Afton firmly believes that she could not have done any of the things she's done in her life without the unwavering support of her family, and especially her husband, Brett.
Steady, steady, nice and steady. Right, heel, cover. I'm a steamroller, baby. I'm a steamroller, baby. Just a rolling down the line. Just a rolling down the line. I'm a steamroller, baby. I'm a steamroller, baby. Just a rolling down the line. Just a rolling down the line. So you better get out of my way now. So you better get out of my way now. Before I roll all over you. Before I roll all over you.
Okay, Afton, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So where did you grow up?
I am an Army brat, much like many of the other guests on your podcast. So this is kind of probably beating a dead horse, but was born in Valcartier, Quebec, and kind of moved around between Ottawa and then Montreal. Didn't stay in Quebec very long after I was born, and I've been in Ottawa the longest. So I would say, and I typically say that I grew up in Ottawa.
Okay, and is your family Francophone?
My father is French Canadian. I also consider myself to be French Canadian, Québécoise even. And my mother is an immigrant actually from Bermuda. She immigrated here when she was about 16 years old to Thunder Bay, Ontario, and that's where she met my father. And yeah, the rest is history.
Okay, awesome. So then I guess you're quite fluent in obviously English, and I'm assuming French as well.
Yes, ma'am.
So what was your childhood like? What sort of activities and sports were you into?
Believe it or not, I wasn't into organized sports a whole lot until I hit high school. My brothers were more into that, into hockey and gymnastics and stuff. But I did do, I did do lots of activities. So my mom made sure that we were super busy. She was kind of a super mom and a stay-at-home Army wife as well, with my father being an armored officer. So I did music lessons. We all did music lessons. I have 2 older brothers and an older sister. But music lessons, horseback riding lessons. We were, I remember playing outside as a kid too. It's definitely a departure from a lot of I think a lot of kids these days are kind of inside playing video games and stuff. That was never kind of part of our MO. Always outside. Let's see what things that we did. I don't know if I did a whole lot of sports. I tried ballet. That didn't work out very well. I'm not the most graceful little lady. Actually, I've never been called graceful any time in my life. So yeah, that didn't work out super well. We did swimming lessons too. So yeah, my mom made sure that we were super duper busy and kind of well-rounded little creatures.
Sounds like very similar to my childhood, except I didn't have any brothers or sisters, but I was involved in pottery. And I think I also probably tried ballet at one point. Again, no grace here. As Elaine from Seinfeld says, I don't have grace. I don't want grace. I don't even say grace. So growing up in a military family, did that plant the seed in your head to want to join the military later in life, or did you always want to do something else?
No, it definitely planted the seed. You kind of hit the nail right on the head. It was always a matter of when and not if for me. I always knew I wanted law was always something that was really important to me. And kind of for as long as I can remember, it was, when I was very young, I was like, I would love to be the first female snowbird pilot. Then of course someone took that and I was like, also, I can't see, I'm super blind, so probably won't work out. But I think law was always a thing. And then at some point it was a question of when am I going to be joining the military and in what capacity as well.
So what did you go to university for initially?
So I have 3 degrees, all from the University of Ottawa, and they're all technically undergraduate degrees. I'm currently pursuing my master's in public administration at RMC. I know that you're also in school right now. My undergraduate is in international development and globalization, which is basically, I guess, economics of development with political science. I really took a lot of economics courses, though. I just appreciated that subject and how it works, kind of the flux of supply and demand and all that stuff. And especially economics of development, where kind of which investments typically bear fruit in terms of development from, the grassroots level all the way up to kind of higher, more strategic levels. So that was really interesting to me. So that was my undergraduate. And then, so I took 2 gap years after high school because I wanted to live on my own and I wanted to save enough money to pay for my undergraduate degree. So I did that by selling cars. And that worked out really well. And then the car dealership in Ottawa, wonderful people. I still maintain comms with them because they're lovely. It's called Bel-Air Lexus Toyota. So shout out to them. But they were able to, I guess, tailor or accommodate my university schedule. So while I was doing my undergrad, I continued to sell cars. So that was really great. And then after that, I took 2 more years off to do a bit of traveling. Just like, live as a young lady does. And then I went back to, I applied to law school. I didn't get in because my undergrad grades weren't good enough. So then the University of Ottawa, I guess, offered for me to take some certificate in civil law courses. So it wasn't the law degree, but it was a certificate. And they said if I get at least 90%, they'll consider my application for the year after that. So I was like, okay, I'll take 6 courses. And my goal was to get at least like 95%. And I did that, which was great. And then I applied again and I got into law school. So 2 years, school again, and then law school for another 4 years where I earned 2 law degrees. It's like 9 years of school. It's a lot, but it's great because I did. So this law program, it's called the National Program at Ottawa U. I can't vouch for it enough. It's a great, it's just so intelligent. And I mean, not to say that I'm this, but it's just, I don't see why anyone wouldn't do it who is interested in potentially practicing in Ontario and Quebec. So I did civil law. So that's, so any law degree, at least at Ottawa U, you'll do kind of, there's federal and provincial law, right? Provincial law governs typically, and it's provided in the Constitution Act of 1867 at section 91 and 92, but no one cares about that on this podcast. But it basically outlines what is provincial and federal jurisdiction. So provincial jurisdiction is typically like private law, like contracts between person 1 and person B, or entity 1 business, and whereas federal law is more of the constitutional law, penal law, so criminal law and that kind of stuff. So any law degree you take will cover that federal piece, but then also go into a deep dive on that provincial piece. So I did civil law for 3 years, but it covered that federal piece, which would have been included in a common law degree. So Ontario is common law, and the national program offers the civil law degree in 3 years, and then they attach 1 year to get your common law degree. So it's a very intense degree or year, but you're basically compacting 6 years worth of law school into 4, which to me is like such a no-brainer. So I did that and it was great. And then I ended up taking the bar exam in Ontario in 2017. And at that time was when Oplentis was going on. So I was slinging sandbags while I was also studying for the bar exam. That didn't work out super well because I passed one of the bar exams and I failed the other bar exam. So there's 2 of them, barrister and solicitor. So the one I was studying when I was on Oplentis was the solicitor. And I did not do well there, but I just took it the next year and I did well. I passed it. So anyway, all that to say, that's what I did in school. And that's kind of the breakdown of my university education.
Okay, sweet. So I'm going to go back a little bit. And you said you did some traveling during your gap year. So where did you travel to?
Oh man. Well, let's see. My gap years. So my first gap years between high school and university, my undergrad, I didn't do any traveling. I was like knee deep in the hustle, I would say. So I was working 4 jobs and I was just like trying to make rent and just doing that thing. And it was a great learning experience. First time I ever lived outside of my parents' house, but also first time like with a roommate. So kind of navigating that piece when you're, all of 18 or 19 years old was really interesting. And then my second gap year, so after my undergrad, I went to, as part of my undergrad, I went to Burkina Faso, which is in the Horn of Africa in West Africa. And I was posted, I guess it was part of my undergrad, to be kind of a commercialization or a marketing consultant. Because at the time by that time I had, for my age, I would say, a lot of experience in like retail, sales, negotiations, all that stuff with selling cars and stuff. So I was doing that in West Africa in a city called Bobo Dioulasso. So that's Ouagadougou is the capital. Bobo Dioulasso is about, I would say, about 400 kilometers approximately. And Bobo, I'll call it Bobo, is like the breadbasket of that country. That's where it's beautiful and lush and green and mangoes and fruits and vegetables galore. Whereas Ouagadougou is a bit higher up. It's a bit more south, and it's really close to the Sahara Desert. So it's a lot more of a desert kind of landscape. Anyway, that was an incredible experience. I did that for 4 months as part of my undergrad. And that was really interesting. So I was working at a micro enterprise run by AIDS orphans and widows. And they would basically teach these women and children like just basic skills so that they could actually become autonomous in the market. So whether it was like very simple bicycle mechanics or kind of gasoline or diesel mechanics, stuff like that. But what they primarily did to earn an income was based on microcredits. They would dry mangoes and basically package them and sell them. So I helped them kind of make that a bit more efficient. I noticed that one of the byproducts of the drying process and that whole process was the creation of really good mango nectar. And it was like, in most mango nectars, they'll include the peel as well. So on this, it was no peel. It was really just the meat from the mango. And I'm a little bit obsessed with mangoes. They're like one of my favorite fruits. I can thank my Bermudian mother for that. It was pretty cool to find out that, okay, they have this byproduct, but they're not selling it. They're just kind of giving it away, which was great too, because the workers and the people benefiting from the association would drink it and use it and stuff. But I was like, you know what, there's so much of it. They would throw a bunch of it away. Why don't we package this and sell it? So that's one thing that we were able to do, and kind of another process we were able to create. We found other efficiencies as well, and like even things like basic accounting. Like they had one computer, it was pretty steam driven at the time, so we managed to kind of create a budget and figure out, can we buy another computer? We got another computer. I showed them, and this is laughable because I'm terrible in math, but I showed them how to do like a basic Excel spreadsheet, and kind of like, because they would keep all of their ledgers by hand, like the old school way, which I don't have any issue with the old school ledger way, but I just found, especially to evolve and get to a place where they may be subject to audits and stuff like that, especially considering the microcredits, that was an efficiency or a new process that we introduced. So anyway, that was a really great experience. And that was in Burkina Faso. And then after that, I went to Jordan for a month in Amman. That was really fun. I had friends who were there, so I traveled there.
So in Burkina Faso, what year was that? Because I would say the security situation sort of now is not overly safe for Westerners to be traveling. So what was that like when you were there?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Now it's not great. I was there in 2008, so it was before kind of everything exploded, but you could feel the tension. They always said, c'est une ballon, ça va péter, like it's a balloon, it's going to pop soon. And it was palpable for sure. But yeah, thankfully when I was there, it wasn't what it is now, for lack of better words.
And okay, so then next is Jordan, which sounds very interesting also.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun actually. And Jordan was honestly just for fun. I had intended, I was like, you know what, I'm young, I'm single, like why don't I go out and like, I had lots of friends who were in Jordan, like old friends of the family too. So I went and stayed with them, which was really lovely. The Kadura family, shout out to them, they're the best. But yeah, I stayed with them for a bit, and kind of the idea was to, if I found work, if I found a way to stay there, I would definitely be open to that, but that didn't work out, which was fine. I was there during Ramadan, which was really interesting, seeing like the really grumpy smokers who like weren't allowed to pass anything through the lips right at the time. So it's like, they just can't wait for their first cigarette when the sun goes down. But it was a beautiful time to be there, because it really gave me an appreciation for that religion, for the religion of Islam, and kind of like learning how beautiful it is and how much love is involved in that religion in general. And yeah, and the food was obviously really good. Just the absolute feast every single evening. And it was very interesting in solidarity with my friends. I tried to observe the fast. I think I had to have water, but I would drink it in secret, or like drink it away from, not in secret, they knew it, but I would drink it away from them just out of respect. But yeah, that was a really interesting time. And it was like such a learning experience. I think traveling, I highly recommend it. I think everyone should travel as just part of their educational experience, just to get out of what I call the belly button, of the universe. Just get out of, first and foremost, as a Canadian, I think it's important for us all to kind of visit our own country. We have a massive country, and just to like get an appreciation for how unbelievably beautiful it is, and like the resources we have, and the different, like it's so cool to see kind of. And I would say I have my father to thank for this, and he took my brothers and I across Canada and back through the US in a Mercury Sable station wagon in, I think this was 1998. So I'm dating myself, but I was in like, I don't know, maybe all of 11 or 12 years old. And we had our little bichon frisé Clifford at the time, and he just kind of like would hang out on top of all the luggage in the back. Anyway, that was a really great time. And that was my first experience of really appreciating how massive our country is and how much we have to offer. And then I was like, okay, I think I have a good idea of what we have in this country. And at that time in 2008 and after that, I had gotten the bug of traveling after Burkina Faso. I was like, you know what, I would love to kind of see more. So yeah, I got to see Amman, Jordan for a month. I went to Bermuda. I had been there once before, I think. And then before that, twice before. The first time I was all of maybe 1 year old. So I definitely don't remember that. But after that, the second time I was much older. So I was able to appreciate that. But Bermuda is a really cool place too. It's tiny. I don't even know what the population is right now, maybe 40,000 people, but they call it the Rock. So it reminds me a lot of what people refer to Newfoundland, as they call it the Rock. So yeah, it's really interesting. And it's kind of like just a really cool island culture. Their accent is awesome. It's it's a cross between the Barbadian accent and the like UK accent, like northern UK accent. Anyway, it's very cool, very Caribbean. It's beautiful. Yeah, that's a great spot too. And then I've been to Paris as well. As part of my law school adventure, I was in the co-op program, which is another program I strongly recommend for anyone who's interested in doing law school and pursuing that piece. Co-op's amazing because you finish with 3 practical kind of experiential things to put on your CV, which is more than literally anyone else who's just graduating law school who didn't do co-op. Maybe they summered at one law firm, but this gave you 3 distinct kind of legal experiences, which was really cool. Anyway, so I did one of my co-op sessions in Paris, France for 4 months. That was in 2015. So that was during the Bataclan terrorist attack. So that was really interesting and also reassuring, because the day after that, even though like Paris had been kind of absolutely just like, yeah, devastated, all of the shop owners opened up the next day without missing a beat. Everyone was out and about. Everyone went to work. Like there wasn't like a rest in place fear factor. There was fear definitely, and you could feel that in the air, but it was almost like the refusal of the French people to accept or like let the terrorists win, for me, was beautiful and like really, really interesting to just kind of live in that. So yeah, I did that. And I love Paris. I would go there over and over again. It's my favorite city. I played rugby there too. It's a great city.
Nice. Yeah, Paris is amazing. I just was there for less than 24 hours on a stopover on the way back from Africa recently, and I wish it was longer. I had been there before. There's always something new to do there, and it's just the history there is so much different than anything we have here in Canada.
We really are the new world, right? Like, it's so funny. It's like, oh, that's cute. It's only 170 years old or whatever it is. That's cute.
Yeah, exactly. Like everything looks, I don't know, everything is just kind of boring and new, I guess, when you go over and you see all these really old European cities. But listening to your travel stories, that's something that I wish I had done earlier in my 20s, is traveled some more. But at the time, I guess I didn't really have the travel bug or didn't really have any appreciation for travel. But now that I'm getting to travel a little more for work, I really see the importance in that for sure. And part of me is kind of like, oh, I would love to be Anthony Bourdain and just travel around the world and eat and drink everywhere.
Right? Wouldn't everyone? Oh yeah, he definitely had. He had it. He just unlocked that level for sure.
So going back to all of your education and travel, where does the military fit into that? When did you join?
So, funny story. I tried to join 3 times. So you'll probably kind of see or hear or figure out the theme throughout my like history, that it's just riddled with a bunch of failures that I just was like, not acceptable, and just like kept keeping on kind of thing. So I tried to get into RMC, right after high school. But at the time, I didn't have the prerequisites I needed. So I ended up going back to high school for Reach Ahead, even though like I had graduated, but I just went back to get that last, I think it was one course that I needed. So I did like summer school, but in Reach Ahead, they called it. So it wasn't for the people who failed. It was for the people who wanted to take extra courses to lighten their loads. A Crown Corporation. And it's, you know, if you're bilingual, it's a great spot, and live in the Ottawa-Gatineau area. It's definitely the spot for you. Made a good amount of money, and it's cool. And it reminds me very much of the military because they feed you, they clothe you, and they basically house you. So it's open 24/7. So they have like a little like resting lounge. If you are working double shifts or whatever, you can like go and sleep in the lounge. So I worked at the Casinos de l'Académie, and they're pretty great because they feed you, they clothe you and all that stuff. And they have this lounge that you can sleep in, and they have a gym, and I was a coach at the gym. Anyway, all that to say, when I was working at the casino, I remember chatting with my brothers about like, well, if you like that about the casino, the military is pretty good for that too. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That was something that I wanted to do. So I applied again, this time to be a Navy Mars officer. And I went through all the tests, kind of did everything, and I made it. I think I was like the top 13 candidates, and I was about to be loaded on to like my BMQ and all that stuff. And then they, I think, cut the budget. And they were just taking 2 candidates for that specific trade. So I remember the recruitment lad, he was very funny. He called me to give me the news. I was like, okay, that's okay. I mean, it wasn't meant to be. And in hindsight, I do believe that it just wasn't meant to be. And I remember him saying, but have you found God lately? Because Padre positions are open. I was like, thank you very much. I found him. I'm good though. That's not super duper what I'm interested in, although I definitely acknowledge how important they are. But that just wasn't the trade. I think for me, it wasn't nearly, and again, in hindsight, it wasn't, and even I think Mars, but I'm not sure, but I'm an infantry soldier now. And what I love most about it is how physical it is. So I don't think that being a Navy Mars officer would have answered the mail in that respect for me personally. Notwithstanding the whole universality of service thing, of course, every single soldier needs to be able to do, the moving, shoot, move, and communicate job. But all that to say that I ended up, didn't make it in the first 2 times or for whatever reason. And then the third time I was playing rugby, I was in law school. And I was playing rugby for the GGs, and I was also playing rugby for my rugby club that I had been playing with since high school called the Ottawa Irish Rugby Club. So shout out to them. They're the best. And I guess I was playing with this teammate. She's the best. She's still actively serving. She's a warrant now in Toronto. She's a reservist. And I had thought about, why not join the reserves? Because at the time I was still in law school. There was still that was taking, everything's got to give in life. So that was taking the lead for that particular time in my life, and rightly so. So she said, you know what, why don't you join, the reserves? And at the time she was posted to my existing unit, the Cameron Highlanders of Ottawa. And funny enough, I'd actually originally contacted the Governor General's Foot Guards, which is the other regiment that parades out of Cartier Square Drill Hall in Ottawa. And I had met with their recruiting sergeant and had a great discussion with them. And of course, his first question was, why don't you become an officer? I said, no, thank you. I do enough paperwork in my civilian life, so I don't want to do that. My teammate at the time said, well, you're not joining the Guards, you're joining the Camerons. So she went and had a discussion with the recruitment officer at the time with the Camerons and put us in touch with each other. And the rest is history. I joined the Camerons, and that process took over 2 years though, just because at the time, I guess at the time it was a bit rough even to get in for like testing and the medical. I had done my CFAT already, so that wasn't an issue. I think I had to do it again though, just to update it. And to get my force test was like a pulling teeth kind of thing. Mostly because of me though. I'll take responsibility for that for sure, because I had gone to Paris for 4 months in 2015. So the idea was, I remember him, and he's still at my unit, and I absolutely adore this man, Nathan Smith, and he's still a Cameron Highlander of Ottawa, and he's a CSM now, which is cool because at the time he was a sergeant. I remember him saying, okay, like go do your thing and just email me when you're back and we'll get you in for the force test. I was like, okay, right, like perfect. So did that. Came back in December 2015 from Paris and got my force test done in January 2016 and swore in on February 1st, 2016 with the Cameron Highlanders of Ottawa.
That was my big question for you because I was like, oh, you're a lawyer, but you're an infantry NCM, but you just answered it. So in your mind, this is almost like an escape from the regular job and the paperwork. So you didn't want to have anything to do with doing that in the reserves.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And as much as I appreciate kind of how important officers are and, as leaders and mentors and stuff, I also see the importance of NCMs and specifically senior NCMs as leaders and mentors. And I really think it's the NCMs that kind of keep the engine going round and round. And I love specifically with the infantry, at least for me, and again, I'll shout out a disclaimer because anything I have said is my own opinion and not a reflection of, or not the opinion of the Canadian Armed Forces or my civilian employer, Thales Canada Defense Security. But yeah, I love the role of the infantry NCM and kind of the shoot, move, communicate, and the whole how that works into the role of the infantry, which is to close with and destroy the enemy day or night, regardless of season, weather, or terrain. So how that all interplays together to me is really exciting. And yeah, I think although I'm a master corporal now, so there is definitely administration involved and kind of just to make sure that you're tracking things and you're taking care of your section members and that, everyone's administration is squared away with regards to individual battle task standards and all that stuff. It's significantly less paperwork, from my understanding, than what an officer would be doing. And I also get to do the best job in the world, which is lead a section or be the second in charge of a section. And to me, that's the dopest because your section is a beautiful weapon that you can use. And I always say this, it's like the only limiting element to the capacity of your section is your own imagination. No matter what the task is. So if it's a reconnaissance patrol, you can really, as long as your section they're able to follow orders and follow instructions and everyone's physically fit and kind of wants to be there. And that's the goal, right? You have a team that actually wants to be around and wants to be there and wants to kind of all work together to achieve that same goal. You can do that in so many different ways. And it's really fun and awesome and also daunting because of the responsibility involved. You are really in charge and kind of taking care of these human beings. But they're a great tool. And it's cool to kind of be able to use that tool to achieve whatever mission it is.
And so taking a step back, talk to me about going through your initial BMQ and initial infantry training. What was that like?
So I did all of that. So I did BMQ while I was still in law school. That was, it wasn't bad actually. In hindsight, when you're going through it, you're like, okay, why are they yelling so much kind of thing? And I mean, in hindsight, and now that I've kind of started to develop my own skills as a junior leader, I typically consider that to be more loudership instead of leadership. But of course, there's a rhyme and reason. It's the indoctrination period. There's, you're supposed to be kind of breaking people down so that you can build them up and teach them everything right down to how to tie their shoelaces. So I understand that there's a reason for that madness. BMQ was fine. It was really interesting. I was the only person paying attention to the National Defense Act slides and all that piece. I was like, oh, this is cool. Okay, I love this. Everyone else was absolutely just in French we say cogner des clous, just absolutely falling asleep. So it was really funny. There was one point I remember it was quite a lot to juggle law school with BMQ because I would do it on weekends. Law school was during the week and I was working at the casino at nights, at least 3 nights a week. So that was a lot. And I was also playing competitive rugby. That was all just a whole lot. There was, and I was in co-op too. So I remember one semester I had really bad grades and I was at risk of being ousted from the co-op program. So I was like, okay, something's got to give. So I developed a plan basically for the next semester to take 2 less classes and take a step back from rugby because it was the off season as well. And also lower my shifts at work so I could really focus on school. And I remember sending the co-op coordinator for law school, just a preemptive email being like, hey, this is about to happen. This is my plan. Sorry, I shit the bed. This is how I'm hoping to kind of make it better. And can you please not kick me out of the program? Because I really love what I'm doing. And I really want to continue with the co-op and have that accreditation. And to this day, and he's actually now a great friend. And I'm now a board member on his foundation. And he's just a lovely guy. His name's Jay Gosselin. And I remember him being really impressed with that as okay, this person just kind of didn't sit on their laurels and just let the inevitable happen and just kind of okay, let's be reactive. Instead, I was like, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is my plan to make it better and adjust things so that I can kind of redeem myself, for lack of better words.
An extreme ownership moment.
Indeed, Madame Jocko. Also, I noticed that we follow a lot of the same people, like the Jocko, the Rogans, the Andy Stumpf.
Yeah, I love Andy Stumpf. He is my favorite.
My husband and me are a little bit, not, I wouldn't say obsessed, but like pretty borderline. We're big fans of him. Just, I actually appreciate him just as a human and how he presents himself and how he kind of approaches extremely, I would say, especially today, like some pretty volatile and like some very emotionally charged kind of issues with a very level head. He just like approaches it from a kind of a really cool, objective, logical, unbiased kind of way. And I really appreciate that. That's the way I like to think judges approach their decisions and stuff. It's just a really weighted, thoughtful, anyway, whatever, I digress. Where were we?
We were at the co-op and how you made your plan to not get removed from the program.
Yeah, and it all worked out. I didn't get removed from the program, but I know that there was another source of that, why I got into that, and I can't remember why. Well, I can't remember what your question was.
I think the initial one was just talking about your initial sort of BMQ and training.
Yeah. So yes. Okay. So this is why I was saying that, was because it was a lot to balance. And at that time was, I was also trying to get my BMQ done and stuff. So something had to give. And at that point, it was basically, I needed to get my BMQ done. So at that time it was rugby and it was my like other work, because of course I was able to earn an income. So at the time, I think in 2016, I gave my resignation at the casino because I was able to earn an income with the reserves. And I also just straight up I couldn't split myself into more than one person. So I just needed to concentrate on that. I do remember one occasion, it was a Sunday and we were at Connaught Ranges Primary Training Center, which is where I did my basic military qualification as a reservist part-time. And the buses there was always some sort of mess up with the buses. So they would pick all the different people who were on the BMQ up from their kind of unit. So the bus would take us from Cartier Square Drill Hall on Friday afternoon or Friday evening and to Connaught, and then drive us back from Connaught to Cartier Square Drill Hall. And the buses were late. And the next day I had a really important essay that was due, and I had started to prepare it. But the idea was for me to be done and at home from BMQ at the latest 5 p.m. And I remember being in a classroom at Connaught at like 6:30 p.m. and just breaking down basically because a staff member came in, they did a tactical pause. And I actually really appreciate this staff member. He was pretty great. And he just came up to everybody. He's like, all right, how's everyone doing? And then he looked at me and was like, how you doing? And I just like, for whatever reason, the humanness in his voice and in his face, I just kind of like started welling up in my eyes. And I was like, I'm okay. Because I was just like so exhausted. And at that particular point, I was almost like catastrophizing. I was like, I'm gonna fail. I'm gonna fail this essay and I'm gonna fail law school. And then I'm gonna friggin' die alone under a bridge. Like just that lizard brain nonsense that happens. So I remember him just being, all right, let's go private. And he took me into another room and like, he just like, what's going on? Because I had been very kind of not stoic, but just kind of, BMQ was BMQ for me. Like it wasn't, it was fun. There were definitely some challenges there, but I would just kind of go with it. And yeah, it wasn't a huge kind of tax on my mental game, I would say. And I guess he hadn't seen me that way ever. So he brought me to the other room. He's like, what's going on? I was like, well, I have an essay that's due tomorrow. And I just started absolutely bawling my eyes out. And he's like, okay. And at the time he brought my section 2IC in. She's wonderful. She was actually a registered dietitian. She's now out of the military, but reserves, it's so funny. Everyone has their like primary thing. And she was just my registered dietitian for the fight that I had 2 weeks ago. So it all comes full circle. But she came in and was like, okay, because I guess they hadn't been tracking that I was like actively in law school and working and playing rugby competitively and doing all this stuff. So they're like, okay, well, we can maybe so they had the course officer write a letter to my professor to kind of, I guess, get a deferral. And that all worked out, which was great. So that bought me, I think 48 hours, which was like more than enough. Got that taken care of. But I do distinctly, that to me is a core memory from my basic military qualification, kind of the, The friggin' buses. That's what did me in. The late buses when I had an essay to finish that night. And I was like, friggin' jeez Louise. Anyway.
It's so funny, like listening to, obviously some people have their things to say about the weekend basic training, but not really realizing that these are people who have full-time jobs and or are in school or both. That's a lot to balance. So I can definitely see why that sort of boiled over for you at that moment.
Oh, yes, ma'am. And I have to say, like, you're preaching to the choir. My basic military qualification, my DP1 Mod 1 those were both part-time. And had I not been able to do them part-time, I probably would still be like a private or maybe a corporal, like right now. So I was able to get those done part-time. And that's the thing, like, there's a lot of reservists, and that's the point, right? If you're a reservist, and the way I see it, my kind of personal experience is like, I want to be there. Any other sane person would be like, I'm not working on the weekend. I'm staying home and chilling out and, recharging my batteries because I have a demanding job. It's like, no, like, I actually want to be here on the weekend and freeze my ass off and like be wet and kind of do this, patrolling or whatever. I want to be there because I love it. I love the training, and the why of the training is so that we can be operationally ready to supplement the reg force or whatever we need to do. So that to me is a really important thing that I do that is part and parcel. It's like my co-career because I consider myself to have two careers. So that's important. And I find that in working directly with a lot of reg force folks, specifically at, 3 RCR and 1 RCR. Those are the two kind of infantry regiments in Petawawa, Ontario. I live in Renfrew, so I'm halfway between Ottawa and Pet. We did that because my husband works in Petawawa, obviously. But it's been interesting kind of navigating that, and I guess almost helping advocate for reservists because I like to show up and show out. That for me is really important. And especially if it's like the reputation of reservists or at the very least my own unit on the line, that's something that's incredibly important to me. So I think our unit has been really great in kind of helping that advocacy in the last couple years. Anytime we work with the reg force, we show up, we show out, like we're the ones like being, getting coins and stuff from the CSMs and OCs and stuff. So not CSM, but it's OCs and COs and stuff from those units. So it's been really great. And I'm a huge proponent of it. And although you're right, there are pros and cons to part-time courses, like things like skill fade, especially when you're doing, DP1 Mod 1, that's the infantry qualification course. So it's Mod 1 and Mod 2. Mod 1 is all weapons. So we learn how to use the machine guns. So the C9 and the C6, which is the general purpose machine gun. We learn how to use, actually, I'm pretty sure that was it. C9 and C6, because they left everything else like the rocket launcher and the Carl Gustav and the M203, which is a grenade launcher, and the Claymore. They left all that to the units to do in kind of a Delta package. But anyway, all this to say a very technical course, right? You learn the theory of machine gun fire, and you're kind of learning how to use these kind of, I would say, like boomsticks, for lack of better words. And you're doing it on a part-time basis. So skill fade is a legitimate thing there. And then Mod 2 is the patrolling portion. Now, that one I did full-time in Meaford, Ontario, right after I wrote the bar exams. So that was interesting. I did that in 2017. And just before that, I had been slinging sandbags at Alplentis. So I did that one full-time. I don't know if that one could be done part-time. It could be. I guess the field portion couldn't be, though. And there was a defensive, and there was like a whole, like, it was so long ago now, but I don't know if the field portion could be split up. But all that to say, part-time courses, there's pros and cons, but I feel like it's the only way to continue to kind of get trained reservists. And then the hope is that I think my understanding is that the units can kind of supplement that and make sure that the skill, at least mitigate the skill fade as much as possible with their training and kind of throughout the year, 1 day a week and 1 weekend, a month. So yeah, big proponent of that.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who in the Navy Reserves, and they have full-time jobs, they're firefighters, they work for the Coast Guard, whatever it is they do. And it's hard because you have to know when a course is taking place, and which sometimes in the Navy Reserve world, the dates can change, and then they have to book that time off and make sure they're covered off. So there are a lot of other challenges that come with it. So for you in your I guess I don't want to say regular job, in your full-time job, How do you balance that and get time off for Army Reserve requirements?
Yeah, so advocacy is a huge part of that. So just kind of being as full disclosure as possible, even during the hiring process, is incredibly important. So I made sure of that. And then throughout, kind of just, reminding, and it's so funny. So at my law firm, I articled with Kelly Santini, and then I was hired back as an associate, as a lawyer with Kelly Santini. What a good law firm. Awesome. Extremely supportive people. I remember I was practicing. Funny enough, I failed the solicitor exam my first time around. I passed it the second time around, but I ended up becoming a solicitor in practice. So it's kind of ironic. But I ended up kind of, one, they were aware that I was a reservist. I remember coming to work with I don't know, just really sore. And I was walking a specific way, and they're like, what happened? I was like, oh, I was just rucking on the weekend. It's fine. But so they just knew that I was a reservist. And then I remember the first, Oplentis 2019. At the time, I was practicing in real estate law. And I remember we got all of 24 hours notice to move. And I make it very clear to my employers, I joined the reserves to step up to the plate when they need people for either domestic deployment or a foreign deployment. But it's been domestic deployment so far. And my answer will always be unequivocally, yes, please, put me in, coach, because that's why I joined. That's my why. Let me use at least part of the training that I've been doing for the last couple of years. That's my raison d'être. So I said yes, and the firm basically supported that and gave me 2 weeks of unpaid leave. So definitely took a huge pay cut because my reserve pay as a corporal was not my associate pay as a lawyer. But thankfully, I don't do it for the paycheck. I never have. I never will. But what was important there was that kind of my mentor at the time and his team and my, everyone just chipped in, right down to the receptionist. She's amazing. That whole law firm, they really just swooped in and basically made sure that my clients were taken care of. All of their deals were closed. I was practicing primarily in real estate law. So that was really important because I owe my clients a fiduciary obligation, right? So I need to make sure if I do this, I need to make sure I have coverage. So that full disclosure and actually discussing with my mentor and my bosses what that actually means if I am called away. We had those discussions. I don't know if they truly understood what that meant until I was called away, but they got it afterwards. And definitely some growing pains, but I strongly recommend if you are a reservist and you have a full-time job or career, full disclosure, you need to be as vocal as possible about it. You need to be as honest as possible about it. Since then, I'm now I'm no longer practicing privately. I'm now in-house counsel for a defense contractor actually called Thales Canada Defense Security. So it's funny because I work in procurement law, obviously without breaching any solicitor-client privilege stuff, but I work in Canadian defense procurement law specifically. So it's really interesting to kind of see how the sausage is made from that perspective. I use the sausage as an infantry soldier, but I've never seen it being made. So that's been really interesting reconciling that and kind of putting all of that together. And, I feel like I have a vested interest in the outcome of these kind of, procurements and stuff. So that's been really great. But again, even in the interview, that whole kind of process, and thankfully my boss, her husband, is in the reg force as well. She is fully aware of what that means when, there's a deployment or whatnot. So that was really important for me to make that connection and advocate for that. And that was in the very first interview. I indicated that and what that actually meant. And thankfully, she is someone who is incredibly supportive of Canadian Armed Forces members. Actually, her sister, Major, I can't remember what her first name is, but Marshall?
Okay.
Melissa? Melissa
Yeah.
Marshall.
I interviewed her, yes.
Yes. So that's her sister, is Rebecca Marshall Pritchard. And her sister is, Rebecca is an incredible, I would say, badass lawyer and mentor. She's definitely one of my mentors and someone I look up to. So they're both just super high achievers in totally different kind of ways. But yeah, they're a cool family. Yeah. So all that to say, she's very supportive of that. So the advocacy, though, it needs to be consistent. And you basically just need to keep marching to the beat of that same drum over and over again and be okay with potentially sounding like you're being a dead horse. But it's so that when push comes to shove and the call is made, you're like, well, they're aware that I'm going to be saying yes. And then obviously maintaining comms, right? So even with Oplentis 2019, I knew that there was a possibility that they were going to have like a notice to move thing coming down the pipeline. So I immediately kind of let my boss know, hey, just so you're aware, this may be coming down the pipeline. Like, let's gird our loins a little bit. So just kind of maintaining those comms as preemptively as possible. And then, I mean, worst case Ontario, if it doesn't actually happen and the call doesn't come through, you just don't go. And that's fine. So just maintain comms and just kind of be as vocal as possible about the fact that you're reservist, and like that's equally important to you as a career as your primary career.
So talk to me about boxing. How did you get involved in that?
So in 2019, I participated in, I sound like I'm reading off a billboard, Ottawa's only white collar boxing competition. It's called Fight for the Cure, and it's to raise funds for the Ottawa Regional Cancer Foundation. So the idea is that they took kind of 12 non-boxers and white collar folks. So I guess at that time I fell into that category, to my chagrin, to the infantry soldiers' chagrin. Yeah, it was great. It was 10 months. Actually, we trained for a good year, actually, because it was in October 2019. Of just twice a week training camp with the organizer and just a tremendous boxing coach. His name is Scott Whitaker. He owns a company called Millions.co. He's a pretty cool cat, and he actually helped me recently and helped the Cameron Highlanders boxing team just recently with the latest event. But anyway, got started by just seeing the year before, one of the equity partners at Kelly Santini, her name is Lisa Langevin. She's a cool lady too. And she had actually, her and her best friend Daphne, they both played Gaelic football. Daphne is a mother of two. Lisa is a mother of two, stepmother of five, I think. So 5 total, with like her stepchildren and her children. And she's like a incredible litigator. She's pretty cool. Just, yeah, I feel like I'm surrounded by incredible human beings. I'm very lucky for that. But anyway, she did Fight for the Cure with Daphne in 2018, and they were the first female bout ever in Fight for the Cure. And I went to watch her with the rest of the law firm, and it was so much fun to just see her and Daphne go at it. And they were, in my opinion, and objectively, like the most athletic, the most dynamic bout of the night. Because the idea is like you take non-boxers, but I think that translated into, and just the way it worked out was kind of non-athletes and kind of just like regular Joe Blows. And that's the great thing about it, right? You train for 10 months. Most of the guys like lose a ton of weight. They get super fit, and it's raising money for such a great cause. So, but Daphne and Lisa were both, and they still are, like big Gaelic football players, which is like a lot of hand-eye coordination, a lot of athleticism. So it was a great fight. And that was like, I watched that and I was like, I would like to try to do this next year. I think I could do it, because I was playing rugby at the time pretty competitively. And I was like, okay, I'm fit. I know I don't have great hand-eye coordination, but like maybe I'm good with contact. So anyway, tried out, made the team, I raised 10 grand. And then I managed my family and friends bought 2 tables worth, which was about $5,000 for the cause. And then my law firm bought 3 tables. Lord knows how much those were because they were ringside, but that's a lot more thousands for the good cause. So that was a really, really great night. Overall, we all raised over $500,000 for the Ottawa Regional Cancer Foundation in 2019. So that was a really successful event. And my opponent, Megan Apostolaris, is an absolute animal. She owns her own CrossFit gym out east now, I think in Halifax, potentially. She put on a really good fight. We put on a really good show. In that fight, I lost by split decision. It was like a super good fight. And then I kind of would just tinker around with the punching bag on occasion. I got pregnant, and I would continue to kind of punch the punching bag as just like cardio or whatnot. And then about 3 months after having my son Liam this November, so November 2022, I was asked if I wanted to join the Cameron Highlanders of Ottawa boxing team. Now, I was on mat leave still at the time, and I still am on mat leave from the Canadian Armed Forces. But I was like, you know what? This for me is giving me, I guess I don't like going to the gym for the sake of going to the gym. I need some sort of a goal. So it needs to be, and typically that goal for me needs to be in the form of some sort of a challenge, whether it's, I don't know, a run or whatever, an event, a sport, blah, blah, blah. I need that. So, or a job, for instance, if I have a course to train for, like that for me is what I need. So this was exactly what I needed to kind of get off my butt, although it was postpartum. So like you have to do things really slowly. You have to just give yourself a lot of grace and understand that you just had a baby. Your body went through a whole lot of trauma. And that, you got to just like take things slow and do things right so that you don't create more trauma and more kind of things that you'll have to kind of rehab. But did that, and this was kind of a great opportunity to do that. So I've been training since November with the Cameron Highlanders of Ottawa boxing team and the Governor General Foot Guards boxing team for an event that is now called Clash of Cartier, because it's Camerons versus Guards. And 2 weeks ago on April 1st, we put on a show at the Shaw Centre in Ottawa. So that was really cool. And the idea was to raise funds for the Governor Generals of Foot Guards youth bursary, which I think we did. I haven't followed up with him because I've just been kind of, I fell off the radar a little bit just to kind of get some decompression and Easter and all that stuff. But I think it was very successful. The event was sold out days in advance. So over 250 people were there. Scott Whitaker from Millions.co, who also does Fight for the Cure, he streamed the event on Millions.co, and the proceeds from that like pay-per-view stream went towards the cause as well, which is great. And he would also do like a guest appearance for some of our sparring sessions on Saturday. So we got to punch each other in the face a couple times. That was fun. So I guess I can say I've been coached in like a structured manner for 10 months plus 5 months? So 15 months total. Otherwise, like it's just been me tinkering around and following YouTube videos or whatnot, but I love it. I love the sport. I'm so bad at it, but I feel like everyone's really bad at something they start. Like I hear people trying jujitsu for the first time and they're obviously awful at it, but you just keep working at it and you get better and better with more, consistent training and practice and all that stuff. So I'm not stopping. And this year was the inaugural year of Clash of Cartier. So the idea is to like double, triple, quadruple the event size next year. We've heard a lot of feedback from people who weren't able to make it because it was sold out, or people who saw it on the stream who want to go next year in person. It's going to be a really great event. And I think we're going to start organizing it like in the next couple of weeks, basically for next year. So that's going to be excellent as well, because there was a lot of lessons learned, obviously, in the inaugural year, and lots of things that we can improve on for the next time. It's going to be absolutely stellar, and I'm super duper looking forward to it. And I'd really just enjoy the process of, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, what do you enjoy the most about boxing?
Man, like the absolute depth of things that I don't know. Like I'm like not even scratching the surface with the training I've done, and kind of the I do a lot of, like I watch a lot of video and kind of do like a lot of that kind of stuff, like analysis of like boxing and seeing, okay, what works for them? Why does it work for them and stuff? I know I'm just scratching the surface. They call it the sweet science for a reason. Like it's just, and that's why I went into law as well. I went into law because I knew that there would always be significantly more shit that I don't know than shit I do know. Always, because it always evolves. And I feel like that's very similar to boxing. Yeah, so it's I love that about it, and like acknowledging that I'm really bad at it, but I love it so much, and I love learning and kind of even seeing little wins for me. And for me, I'm all about the process and about like I don't care if I win or lose, because I've had 2 fights now, both of them I lost, and I don't care, because for me the win is the fact that my second fight was light years ahead of my first fight in terms of my own performance. So that for me is my own personal win. And I mean, I'm 37 years old. I'm not going to be in the Olympics anytime soon. So it's really just for me and to enjoy and have fun and do it and stay fit as well and have a reason to stay fit. But I would say the wealth of knowledge that I don't have, that I can just like start gathering and gaining and continue to learn forever. I think that's what I like most about it. And obviously the physicality is fun.
Okay. And so here's a question, because you do have obviously a highly cognitive job. Do you ever worry about head injuries and concussions and the potential effects of that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Definitely for me, and it's less my job and more about my son and my husband, and just kind of being present and being able to enjoy those parts of my life without feeling tired or without having any of the, typical side effects of concussion or TBI. If ever there's a point, and I watch it closely, if ever I feel like there's a situation that's unsafe, I thankfully am surrounded by coaches and people who would never put me like willfully into an unsafe situation. But yeah, I've got the concussion protocol good to go. Like even Clash of Cardsy was really well run. We had a doctor there, like a team, a doctor, an athletic therapist, who's amazing, by the way. She was the head athletic therapist at U Ottawa when I was a GG. And now she's gone on to open up her own business called 360 Center. She's pretty cool. If you're in Ottawa, Jen Bushel, she's your lady. She's actually the best. But yeah, she was there. So they had, and there's forms that you have to fill out, and to be like sanctioned by Boxing Ontario, there's a whole protocol that you have to follow. So that for me was really comforting to see a concussion protocol and then to see that they actually followed through. So we got down from the fight and the doctor would actually like look at us, talk to us, and just check us out and do that kind of basic protocol stuff after the fight and then before the fight as well to get a baseline. So that for me was really great. And I don't think, especially at my age, like I have a lot to lose now that I have a son, and I have a husband, and I have things that it's less about work, more so just about being able to do, because I work to live. So yeah, right. It would be great to not kind of have a TBI or whatever, so I could keep earning an income. But ultimately it would really suck to not be able to manage my emotions or manage my, that piece when my son's around. That would be it would be so awful. And I feel awful for people who have TBIs and who kind of are going through that. It does not sound like a fun time.
Sort of one of the common themes, and you had mentioned it earlier, is failure and how you failed so many times, but you just keep going. So where does that come from, or what do you tell yourself after you experience a failure?
Oh man, that's a great question. Where does that come from? I don't know if it comes from anywhere specifically. So in hindsight, and I'm trying to think about this as I talk, hence all the filler words, but I think it might have just developed after failing so much. And I was just like, oh, this is fine. And then just keep on keeping on. Because the worst thing that happens when you fail is, okay, you fail. You just get back up. That's fine. And, just being comfortable there. And not so comfortable that you're happy with the failure, but just being comfortable with the fact that you failed, acknowledging it, and moving the fuck on, for lack of better words. But you got to just keep going. And I think I just developed that from failing so much. I even think of if we want to go back to infantry, in 2020, I did my sergeant's course, so infantry section commander course. And it was an awesome course. Another reason why part-time courses are great. So I did the mod 3 and mod 4. So there's 4 mods. So there's the PLQ mod 1, which is done on the distance learning. Mod 2 is CAF wide. So that's where they do the teaching and that whole thing. There's a very structured way. I'm assuming you're a JAC as well, at least. So yeah. So this is more for the folks who are listening. And then mod 3 is more of the, what do they call it? Stability operations piece. So there's a bit of patrolling there, but it's presence patrols, vehicle checkpoints, that kind of stuff. And then mod 4 is infantry specific. They call that infantry section commander course. So it's only infanteers who do that now. So I did my mod 3 and my infantry section commander course full-time in Petawawa. And I had already done my mod 1 because it was distance learning. And then I did mod 2 after the fact, part-time in Ottawa. And that's the only reason why I'm a Master Jack now, is because I was able to do mod 2 part-time. So again, another reason why it's important to take that into consideration, as much as it's skill fade and stuff. It wasn't too bad with mod 2 because it was teaching and stuff and doing your assessments. And I actually found it was fine because I was able to work full-time while I was doing that course. So it was good. But talking of failures, after my sergeant's course, 2 weeks after my sergeant's course, I had been loaded on for a basic reconnaissance patrolman course, which is in infantry. It's there's basic reconnaissance patrolman and then there's advanced reconnaissance patrolman. And basic is basically teaching. It's typically a private to master corporal course.
Basic recce?
Basic recce, exactly. So I had been loaded on for basic recce 2 weeks after my ISCC, which was pretty physically taxing. The one and only time I ever have abs is right after a course, and specifically after that course, because I like food too much and abs are made in the kitchen. But you typically lose a lot of weight and it's really taxing. So I was loaded onto the recce course 2 weeks after my ISCC. And I remember telling our ops captain at the time, I said, and he was a 6'9" for 1 RCR. And he said, there's no one else really who can do it, who's available to do it. And I told him, I said, well, I mean, if that's the case, fine, like I'll send it. But I'm telling you, like I would need more time to prepare. I would need more time to recover from my ISCC. So all that to say, I did it, I sent it. And on the NAV portion, I wasn't able to continue physically. I was basically medically released from the course, but I was actually super rattled by the fact, not by the fact that, oh, I won't get the qual. I was super rattled by the fact that I knew I was just scratching the surface in knowledge and with like the things that they were teaching on that course, because it was really awesome basic infantry skills like navigation and all that stuff. Like it was so awesome. And like steno and all those things. And steno, surveillance, target acquisition, and night optics, I think. Anyway, so all that stuff was part of the course as well, which is really interesting to me because we don't get to play with that stuff as often as I would like us to in the reserves. But I was super rattled about the lack of kind of not being able to continue and at least get the knowledge piece. So what I did was I asked the course warrant at the time and the officer, and then I asked my chain of command if they would be amenable to me staying on the course, like as a GD or whatever, if the course would be okay with that, so that I could audit the course and at least like sit in on all classes, take notes, and just kind of benefit from that knowledge. To my surprise, they all accepted. They said that's a great idea because I don't think they really had a spot for me at the unit at the times. And at the time I was on extended leave of absence for my law firm. They accepted and I was able to continue on the course and basically right before their patrolling section, or like their not patrolling section, but their field portion, like their final kind of exercises. So that was great. So that's another example of kind of not accepting a failure, or accepting the failure, but then trying to make lemonade. You know what I mean?
Do you think you'll go back and do that course now to get the qualification?
I would love to, but now the kind of formula has changed. My son is my priority, and I'm good with that. And my husband also kind of, his career needs to take priority. My husband is like next level. He's an incredible human being. He's a cyborg. I'm in awe of him regularly. And I have to give him a shout out because he could have been on course, but instead, like this year, he decided to take parental leave so that he could be present with me right after having our son and be basically a present dad with our son. And he's actually going back to work tomorrow for the first time. So he took 8 months of parental leave to kind of be there and be with his family and support his family. So I have to shout out to him because he basically delayed his career for a year to just be an awesome dad. So he's pretty cool. Yeah. And I went off on a tangent there, but I don't know if Recce is in the books for me now, because now my husband, like, he needs to be able to focus on going on his course and doing well there. And my role for the next year or so is going to be basically just like managing the home front, working, being a lawyer and stuff, and being an infanteer. But we'll see if the opportunity does come up. Unfortunately, it hasn't in a little while. I think one of our members just got loaded on a recce course in Gagetown, but we've been having a really hard time getting spots as reservists on these kind of reg force courses. And that makes sense to me because, the priority for the reg force is to get their own guys qualified. But it's been pretty rough for the recce. So we have a pre-recce group now with the Camerons. Last year, they had asked me to run that because of primarily because I was able to actually like stay on the recce course and audit it and stuff. And then we were augmented by some other folks who were recce qualified, which is really great. But it's unfortunate because, if you think about training, right, you usually have a specific date, or at least an idea of the date for what you're training for physically, but it's not really sustainable. I don't care how old you are, to basically maintain that level training, right, for the entire year. Like it's not good for your body either. It's been tough for us, but we're doing our best to kind of like do the training in waves, because the pre-recce portion, or the pre-recce team basically at our unit, I guess there's like a trifecta of stuff. There's the academic piece. So we make sure that we take them through at least most of the stuff that they'll be exposed to on the course. And then there's a physical aspect, right? So they need to be physically ready for that course because it's extremely physically demanding. And then there's the kind of attendance piece. So that's how we kind of assess and merit them. And it's been tough because, of course, that's the goal. We merit them based on these three things. Everyone's working their arses off all year long, and then no course comes up. It's like, oh, well, you're merited first, but there's no course. So sorry, dude. So that's been a bit rough for the team. But I'm on mat leave from the Canadian Forces until November. So I'm doing my best to kind of like disengage and do that. But it's tough to hear that.
So, what are your goals for the future when it comes to your civilian career and then your military career?
Well, my civilian career, I love where I'm at. I work for Thales Canada Defense Security as in-house counsel, and it's a great company to work for and with. I work from home, which is really great. And I guess my goal there would be to continue. I'm taking a master's in public administration with RMC right now, part time. I actually have yet to take a course, so I'll have to take my first course this summer on a part-time basis. And the idea there would be to kind of just continue to build the skills, my legal skills, my deductive reasoning skills, and kind of my ability to kind of digest a lot of information and make it palatable for a business or someone who is, an executive or whatnot, and just learn more about the procurement law aspect as well, because that is a very distinct, very specific, very niche field, and just kind of keep on doing that. That's been great. I do also write academically, typically with my mentor, Rory Fowler. He used to be a judge advocate general in the Canadian Armed Forces. He was an infantry officer before then with the PPCLI. And I would like to continue writing with him. We write on issues of military justice, and we're currently looking to write something on the impartiality and independence of military judges, which is kind of a very current military justice subject. So I'd like to continue writing academically on that as well in my free time. Infantry, I would love to try recce again. I would just need advance notice so I could arrange for childcare and also get my body ready, because I am 37 and I need more time now to get ready for stuff like that. And it's definitely a different beast of a course, but I would absolutely love to try that again. But yeah, and because of my needs now to kind of have advance notice, I don't know if the stars will align. So I'm also trying to manage my expectations on that front and just understanding how the big green machine works. And yeah, I would love to keep boxing. I will definitely continue boxing in the realm of Clash of Cartier, because this was the inaugural year and we'll be back next year. And I would love to do that some more, and as an amateur boxer. And yeah, those are kind of my career goals. And then I guess on a personal perspective, I would love to be a decent mom and a decent spouse. So that's like my actual life goal, is to just have a family and for my son to be just a decent human being and a lovely little boy. So that would be pretty cool too.
Those are all great goals. I have a somewhat random question. Have you done the Myers-Briggs personality test before?
Oh, shoot. That sounds familiar. I might have, maybe for rugby one year, like with the GGs, because the rugby coach at the time was like big into that stuff. Why?
I'm just trying to see if there's a trend with sort of a lot of women that I interview seem to have very similar personality types. And I was just wondering if you knew what yours was.
Ah, that's so funny. Well, you know what? I'm going to write that down. So Myers, is it Myers?
Meyers, I believe. I can send you a link for one.
Yeah, I'll take it. And you should maybe have, that would be fun, like just as a data point, right? To get all the ladies that you've interviewed so far.
There's definitely some commonalities with the more like hard charging women for sure.
Hard charging. It's so funny because like I've listened to your podcast and I've listened, and I find that I am not nearly as cool as all the other women you've interviewed. Like, they're awesome. So I'm humbled by the fact that I'm here, and grateful that you took the time to meet me and hang out and chat and stuff, because you're pretty cool too. So that'd be funny though to see as a data point, right? What everyone's personality. What's yours?
Mine is INTJ, which is basically, apparently it's very rare for women. But yeah, I'm actually a hard introvert.
Hard introvert. Okay. Interesting. That sounds like my husband. He's definitely an introvert, but he also can be a social butterfly if he wants to, but it's very taxing on his social battery.
Yeah, same. And it has to be kind of around people that have similar interests.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I feel like that makes sense for like anyone.
Yeah, I find it hard to, I guess, carry on a conversation if it's something I can't relate to, or don't have any interest in.
I think of you like skydiving to me is insane, because I don't understand why anyone would jump out of a perfectly good airplane, but I would definitely consider doing it just to try. But yeah, that seems like so wild
You should try it. So Skydive Ottawa, there's Dan Whitman, who I'm not sure if he's still in the Canadian Forces, but he was. I believe he was a medic. And so he's at Skydive Ottawa, and you should go see him for a tandem jump. And then
Cool.
Guaranteed you will get addicted to it.
That's so funny. Duly noted. I'll have to tell it because I was telling Brett about it, Brett being my husband, about it, and he's always wanted to do it. And I was like, well, you know what? I would maybe be willing to do that with you if you want it. So I'll mention that to him. We can have that as like a couples outing. Because that's the shit we like to do on dates. It'll be, yeah. And it's so funny because now that I've had a baby, I'm like, yeah, I'd like to try skydiving. Like, does that make sense? Not really, but it is what it is.
There's a lot of people, my friend Erin, who has 2 kids, just started skydiving this summer.
Nice, okay.
And there's other people that do as well. So you see like the kids running around the drop zone. It is, I mean, statistically, and I like to read all the accident reports for that kind of stuff. Same goes for scuba diving, just to see, why it happened and what could prevent that sort of thing in the future. And a lot of the accidents, I mean, people like to say like, oh, what if your parachute doesn't open? But your parachutes do generally open. The majority of the accidents actually happen under a perfectly good canopy. And a lot of the times it's just people basically pushing their limits on their landings. So as long as you stay nice and conservative, it's actually quite safe.
Okay, that's interesting. And I've heard Andy Stump talk about that a lot too. Is like a lot of it is human error typically. So just kind of don't be an idiot and you'll be fine.
And so my final question that I always ask everyone is, what advice would you give to women looking to join the military?
Well, it's a great career. If you're specifically looking to join the infantry, be ready for a very physical job. And just, be ready to pull your own weight. Chivalry doesn't exist because you're doing a job. So you need to not expect that, and that's okay. And you'll immediately develop very, very, very strong bonds with the people you do course with, especially the more kind of adverse courses. You will fall in love with the principles of marksmanship and the kind of therapeutic elements of shooting, and that piece as well. That you will fall in love with. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I think there might be a statistic out there where kind of women are typically better at marksmanship, just from a just natural body alignment and kind of that stuff methodology. But anyway, just do it and train for it and be ready for a very physical job, but also very rewarding job, because like the ultimate teammate and teamwork environment, I would say. So if that's what you're into, full send, and don't, if you're anything like me, you won't look back.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been great, and hopefully we will get to see you in some more boxing bouts. So the one that you just had, is that available to watch anywhere online?
Oh man, I don't know. There was a stream. I'll have to ask Scott actually, from millions.co, if there's kind of a playback that we can have access to, because that would be pretty cool, because there was 7 really good fights. So just for that, if you're into boxing, and specifically amateur boxing, because it's definitely not pro boxing, that would be really fun. But yeah, hopefully. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate your time, and you're such a cool chick, and it's such a pleasure to kind of get to know you, and let's stay in touch. And yeah, if ever you need any help or anything like that, I'm around, and happy to be your champion, because I love your podcast. I love what you're doing, and I would love to see it continue on and be even more successful than it already is.
Thank you for listening. The biggest way to help support this podcast is to leave a rating and review on your Apple Podcasts and Spotify apps. You can also visit my Instagram page at Shoot Like a Girl Podcast to see photos from the guests, keep up to date with the podcast, and find out about any merchandise releases.